Which Arizona State Sun Devils are being slept on the offensive side of the football? That's what we're here to discuss on this edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications to get an update whenever we post new content. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day because I know I can rely on you. Like I said, make sure you guys hit like and subscribe. And stay in touch with the content by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. My apologies. I was sick as a dog all week long. We are going to have an episode today and an episode tomorrow. We'll have 3 episodes this upcoming week to finish out July. And then starting in August, we will be back to 5 episodes a week. And we'll have lots to talk about as we have the heat of training camp going on. No pun intended. But before we get that far, guys, there's a lot of Sun Devils to get excited about this year. And there's a lot of Sun Devils that you are also not talking enough about. And that's who we're here to talk about today, is the guys who aren't getting enough love and the guys who feel like they're kind of being left out high and out to dry. I think that's the saying. I can't remember. But the point is, these are guys that I feel aren't getting enough attention. And maybe it's for a reason because we don't know how they're going to fit into the team. Maybe it's because the guys ahead of them are really exciting and really good. But the bottom line is these are guys who should be getting at least more conversation than what they're currently having for the team. These are guys that I'm going to be manifesting have a really, really better season than maybe what we think is going to happen. So that's where we're going to start our conversation today. Taking a look at 3 guys on the offensive side of the football. Before we dive into my first guy, I do want to shout out the offensive line. I've been critical of the offensive line, but at the same time, this could be a unit that does a lot better than we think it is. I think the biggest concern with them right now is just the lack of experience and the lack of continuity. These guys could mesh together very, very well, though, and they could turn into a really rock-solid unit, better than maybe we're thinking. So, like, Lee Fontanu, Aaron Frost, Joey Ramos, Isaiah Glass could progress forward. We could see Bram Walden. There's so many different guys along the offensive line that deserve some attention and deserve some notoriety. So I do want to shout them out here. I'm still holding my breath, but I don't want to consistently be a negative Nancy and a Debbie Downer when it comes to the offensive line. I really want them to succeed. I'm not rooting against anyone. I'm not rooting for the failure of any of these kids. I really hope that they're able to flourish and succeed. It would be amazing if this scheme and if the coaching staff is able to get the most out of these guys and they just turn into a really good unit. Fingers crossed. Let's hop into the 3 guys I do have listed, though. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen, if you guys are watching on YouTube, my 3 little bullet points for the players we're going to talk about. We're going to start with the multi-use converted weapon. If you couldn't guess who that is, it's Javen Jacobs. And guys, it's not a secret how much I like Javen Jacobs. I've dedicated podcasts to talking about him. I have a full podcast talking about Javen Jacobs. This is one of my guys. I will enter this season. I'll probably have to do a list of like the 5 Sun Devils who were like my guys, or maybe like across each position. I don't know. We'll talk more about it down the road. But for right now, Javen Jacobs is one of my guys. This is one of my dudes. I think that Javen Jacobs is going to be in for a really, really good year. And there's so many different factors that are going to go into it. Like I said on here, he's a multi-use weapon. This is a converted wide receiver who has special teams experience and is going to be playing running back. 3 different opportunities for him to get touches and to create big plays. Last year, he had a handful of Kick returns, he was solid with them. I think he was right around 25 yards per return. I don't have it in front of me. He might have been better. He didn't have a ton of volume. So if he was better, it was because he only had a small handful. But he's going to be like the returning guy. There's not too many other guys that'll challenge him. Jordan Tyson should, if he is 100% healthy, but Jacobs should be able to be the primary return man, which is already going to get him a spot on the field. But looking specifically at offense, he does a little bit of everything for you. He's a really good pass catcher. And when they moved him to running back during spring practices, he looked very comfortable at the position. And this is also a position where we're going to be looking for a bona fide star as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And while I do think that Cameron Skattebo could be a really good pass catcher, he kind of showed that ability off when he was with Sacramento State. I think that what Javen Jacobs brings to the table is obviously a little bit more because he's very literally a converted wide receiver. This is a guy who has been running routes and has been accustomed to playing on the outside. He's going to bring that element to the backfield where you get into those empty set formations and you don't have a running back in the backfield and you split them out wide. And Jacobs should be one of the first guys that they call for those opportunities. But they should also be taking a look at him just to get the ball out of the backfield on screens, on dump offs, stuff that's underneath, or maybe some little angle routes and curl routes out of the backfield. Like, it feels like there's tons of potentially endless possibilities here for what you could be doing with Javen Jacobs out of the backfield as a receiver. Now, as a runner, we don't really know yet. You know, he could not have great ball carrier vision, and he might not materialize into a great running back, but he could still be a really good and valuable passing threat out of the backfield. But if he is able to flourish as a runner, I mean, he just becomes that much more valuable to your offense. I have said it before. I will say it again. I will say it more times in the future. This just feels like history repeating itself with another DJ Foster. And there's like so many different things that go into play here with it. They played at the same high school. They played the same like sort of position where Foster was a running back who converted to receiver. Jacobs is a receiver who's converting to running back. They both wear number 8. They're both playing at Arizona State. Like, it's just poetry. And sports are poetry. Football is poetry. It feels like this is going to be some kind of history repeating itself. And I will absolutely manifest that as much as I possibly can. Because when I look at Javen Jacobs, I look at a dude who is going to blossom and is going to turn into a much bigger star and a much bigger impact than people are anticipating and people are thinking. And it feels very small-minded right now. And it's no one's fault. This isn't to insult the intelligence of anybody at all, because Javen Jacobs is an unknown. And not a lot of people know who Javen Jacobs is outside of the people who listen to this podcast or the people who are dialed into the Sun Devils. Like, if you're a casual fan, you're not going to go into the season knowing who Javen Jacobs is, and that's okay. But I promise you, by the end of the season, you will know who number 8 is on the Sun Devils. And you will know that this is a big-time impact player who can turn into and flourish as a versatile Swiss Army knife for this team. I'm manifesting it. I'm telling you guys right now, keep your eye out for Javen Jacobs, because I think the sky is going to be the limit for this kid. There's just so much untapped potential here. I just really, really like what I'm seeing here with Javen Jacobs. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. And it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So for the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can make sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Shout out to the everydayers that are here every day. And tune in tomorrow as we look to the defensive side of the football at 3 players who are being slept on there. Let's go to the next bullet point here. You can see it says a literal sleeping giant. I am talking about none other than the basic power forward that the team has at the tight end position, Messiah Swinson. Messiah Swinson is a 6'8" tight end who I think everybody forgets was a lot of people's pick to be the number 1 tight end heading into last year. This was actually seriously a conversation, was who was going to be the number 1 tight end. And there were some people who were big on Messiah Swinson. I think I was still in on, let me backtrack. I was still a big believer of Jalen Conyers, for sure. I never got out of his camp. But I think that I was split on how they were going to divvy it up. And I did think that Swinson had every opportunity to be a starter. If somebody felt like fact-checking me and trying to ratio me, you could. I know I've always been a Conyers believer. I know that for fact. But I do think that I thought Swinson was probably going to be the starter. Regardless, Swinson still turned in a rock-solid season as the number 2 tight end. 15 catches, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. There were times where he did look like the number 1 tight end for the team, and he looked like he was going to be a really nice and big facet of the offense. Unfortunately, that didn't materialize for the length of the season for a variety of reasons, because the Sun Devils weren't a good offense and they weren't a team that was able to incorporate multiple different weapons. Like they did the best job that they could, but outside of Elijah Badger, Giovanni Sanders, and Jalen Conyers, there were role players, I suppose. But Messiah Swinson feels like he's going to be in for a much better year this year than he was last year. Kenny Dillingham and Beau Baldwin are going to get the tight ends more involved this year. They're going to incorporate these big, massive bodies that they have inside the red zone and for chain moving opportunities. This is where I feel Messiah Swinson could really fit in and find himself a niche with the team. He just looks the part. And when you're built like him, there's just so much limitless possibility for what you can do in the red zone with him. Look, there are very few defensive backs who are 6'3" or taller. There are very few linebackers who are 6'3" and taller. It's just a smaller game than it once was. And I mean, even way back when, you didn't have massive guys like that on the back end of your defense. You had them playing on the defensive line and off the edge. You now have a 6'8" tight end who's going to match up with smaller safeties, smaller linebackers. All you have to do is throw it up to him, because I promise you, he's going to be able to beat these guys in a rebounding contest, and he's going to be able to out jump them. Just put the ball up somewhere in his zip code. He should come down with it. Now, I'm not saying he's going to end up being the best tight end in the nation because of this. Size does not mean everything, but it does present you a lot of opportunities. Also, keep in mind, he's the number 2 tight end here. So he's going to come in, and there's going to be more attention to Jalen Conyers than him. He's going to come in relief for Jalen Conyers. He's going to be one of the options on the offense that you're not going to dedicate as much of your defense to. Right, wrong, or indifferent, because not a lot of teams are going to be game planning for Messiah Swinson. They're going to be too worried about Conyers. They're going to be thinking about Elijah Badger. They're going to be thinking about Cameron Scadaboo, whoever the quarterback is. They're going to be devising up their plans to stop everybody else. And then you're going to have Messiah Swinson, who's going to waltz onto the football field, and everyone's going to be like, oh, they're running the heavy set. That's a 6th offensive lineman. No, it's not. That's not a 6th offensive lineman. That's a tight end. That's a quick tight end, much quicker than you think he is for somebody who's 6'8". I promise you, this is somebody that teams are going to overlook. And how difficult is it to overlook a 6'8" tight end, man? Like, it's just going to happen. If he is able to really seize this role, and if the offense is able to cater to him enough to be able to get the most out of his potential and his opportunity, he could be a really big time impact player for this team. This could be a player who has a much bigger impact than we may realize. I'm not willing to say 300, 400 yards. I think at the end of the day, it would be really tough to spread the ball out a ton. But what I do think is this is a guy who gets a handful of targets a game, has a big play every once in a while, scores a touchdown every once in a while. I think this is a player that is just a matchup nightmare. And if he is used correctly, sure, he could be 300 yards. He could be 400 yards. And who knows? Maybe this offense throws 4,000 yards, man. Maybe this offense throws 3,500 yards. And they need guys to spread the ball around to. And Swinson could be one of those guys. He truly could be. You look at the profile here, it would be hard and maybe even irresponsible to not try and get him onto the football field as much as you possibly could. Run those 2 or 3 tight end sets, because Bryce Pierre was somebody else that I thought about putting on here as well. But I feel like Bryce Pierre is getting some hype. I don't hear anyone talk about Messiah Swinson, and I think that needs to change. I think that Messiah Swinson deserves your attention, and Messiah Swinson deserves to be highlighted as one of the Sun Devils that is being overlooked right now, someone who's being slept on, and somebody who I anticipate is going to have a much better season than maybe anybody realizes. He's a massive person. He is a massive person. He is going to get his opportunities. I promise you, don't sleep on him. You'll regret it. Again, shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. And thank you to the rest of you who are tuning in. Make sure you hit like and subscribe and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow as we look to the defensive side of the football to talk about the guys that no one's talking about on that side. Make sure you tune in. All right. Final guy to talk about. And this is another big player. And he is a veteran receiver going into his redshirt senior season. He has not been able to be completely unlocked by this team. And we've seen flashes and we've seen glimpses of greatness. And I'm willing to bet if he's given an opportunity that he could turn in a surprisingly good senior season. I am talking about Andre Johnson. Flashback to 2021 when this podcast first started. Andre Johnson was one of the dudes that I was hyping up. Andre Johnson was one of the guys that I was very excited for heading into the year. I had him as the number 1 receiver. I looked at this team with Jaden Daniels, and I loved Andre Johnson. And I thought he was the number 1 receiver. He's got the profile at 6'3", 210. He can stretch the field. He's the big body presence. He can be a physical receiver at times. There was a lot to like there with Andre Johnson. It just did not materialize and turn into a consistent player. And you would see those flashes. He would have that big chunk play. But unfortunately, he just didn't do it consistently enough. In 2021, he only had 12 catches. He only had 1 touchdown. Last year, he caught the ball 15 times, which is an improvement, but he went from 15.5 yards per catch to 8.7. Significantly worse. That's almost half his yards per reception that he had the previous year. So Andre Johnson has not had the consistent and reliable production that you've been wanting out of here. So why do I have him listed here? I have him listed here because he's the most veteran receiver on this team as a redshirt senior, and this is a new look offense. And look, let's be honest. Elijah Badger, certified number 1 receiver. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's the guy. And if you don't recognize that, I don't know what to tell you. But if we're being honest, after him, it's wide open. I'm a massive Xavier Guillory guy, and I love Giovanni Sanders. Andre Johnson is still going to get the opportunity to be the other starting receiver on the outside. We have to remember Guillory is transferring in from FCS football at Idaho State. And Guillory, while he has looked good, is not guaranteed to be the starter week one. The team could look to stay with somebody who knows the program well, who has chemistry with a Trenton Bourguet, and who has chemistry with the rest of the guys on this offense. Andre Johnson, for all intents and purposes, has a lot of what you're going to be looking for from this team to get the year started off rolling on a nice stretch. Like, there is a lot of dots to connect here for Andre Johnson being the starting receiver on the outside across from Elijah Badger. Big time Guillory fan here. Big time Giovanni Sanders fan. Love the idea of Jordan Tyson. Andre Johnson is someone we're not talking enough about. And I will absolutely take and shelter some of that blame, because Andre Johnson has absolutely gotten lost in the mix here for all the other players at this program right now. But even in a worst case scenario where he's your fourth or fifth receiver behind those other guys I mentioned, this is somebody who's going to be able to come in off the bench and provide a spark for you. We have to remember this is a guy who was more known for big plays down the field. Somebody who's able to take the top off a defense. He's not 4.3 speed. That's not what I'm saying. But he does give you a vertical threat and that 50-50 opportunity where you just throw it up and you let your 6'3", 210-pound receiver go up and get it. He is that kind of player. He's got that profile. He's got the history of doing that. It's just not been consistent. So why not make it consistent this year? Why not manifest Andre Johnson into the go-to guy when we need to stretch the ball down the field? Why can't he be the taller, slower version of Frank Darby? Frank Darby was a perfect field stretcher for the team. He did it off of speed. Andre Johnson can do it off of his size, and he's a long strider. Like I said, he's not a 4.3 guy, but he's not slow either. I have no idea what he runs. 4.5, I guess. I don't know. Point is, he can be that field stretcher for you. He can be the guy that you just tell him to go on a go route or tell him a deep post or anything like that. Put the ball up somewhere in his zip code, see if he can come down with it. Give him those opportunities, give him those chances to assert himself into the offense with a certified role with the team. Andre Johnson has shown the flashes. And this is one of the reasons why I don't want to go into the season completely forgetting about him. He could absolutely turn into a great senior year receiver for the team. And he could be a much bigger impact than any of us are thinking he might be. I'm certainly hoping so. And I'm hoping that you guys keep an eye out for Andre Johnson as well. Don't be surprised if he is one of the starting receivers week one. I will say that. Do not be surprised if he's a starting receiver week one. Who are the guys on offense that you guys think people are sleeping on? Who are some of the guys that you really like that aren't getting any attention? Let me know in the comments on YouTube, or you can hit me up on Twitter at RichieBrats36 or the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. But that's all I got for you guys on today's edition of the show. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. And like I said, stay in touch by following me on Twitter at RichieBrats36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. And a special thank you one more time to my everydayers who are here every day. That wraps us up here on this edition of the show. Tune in tomorrow as we talk about the guys on defense who are being slept on. Until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun.